This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, Kishore, I saw your message. We'll discuss that. Some point today we'll discuss that. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So let us discuss about something called as uh, friend classes. Friend classes. Okay. So what I'll do is first let us discuss this friend classes concept in what local classes. Then we'll go to what global classes. Yeah. I'll go to ABAP editor. Yeah, please mute your speakers, all of you. If you don't have any questions, please mute your speakers. Yeah. So Z6AM OPS, friend classes in local classes. Yeah, first what I'll do is let me just Google for any documentation. So I'll just say a friend class in ABAP. Yeah. So I'll go to the standard site help.sap.com. Friendship between the classes. So let us understand some points here. Yeah, friendship between classes. Yeah, what they are saying here, there is normally a strict division. There is normally a strict division between external and internal classes. So external means they are considering public classes, external classes. Internal classes means protected and private classes. So far, we are giving public, protected, private at component level. Now they are talking at the class level. Okay, a consumer can access only the public components of a class. We already know outside the class, we can access only the public components. This allows the internal implementation of a class to be changed without invalidating its consumers. In rare cases, however, classes have to work so closely together that they require access to their mutually invisible components. In rare cases, however, classes have to work so closely together that they require access to their mutually invisible components. The concept of friendship between classes was developed so that these components do not need to be made available to all the consumers at the same time. Okay, need not be available to all the consumers at the same time. Friends, a class can grant friendship to other classes and interfaces, and thus to all classes that implement this interface. This relationship is created using the friends addition of the statement class definition by specifying all classes and interfaces to which friendship to be granted. These friends are granted access to all components of the class offering the friendship, regardless of their visibility section, or the addition read only can always create instance of class regardless of addition. Okay, done. Yeah, we advise caution when granting a global interface friendship. Each class that implements the interface becomes a friend of the class granting the friendship. If a global interface is used, the extent of this friendship should be limited using the package concept, for example. Okay, done. So they gave some note here. Okay. They gave some example here. Let me just click on this. Yeah, that gave example about the interface here. Okay, fine. So let's understand with example this friends keyword, friendship between the classes. Then you'll get the better understanding on this. So see here. I'll take a very simple example to understand the concept here. Suppose I'll take a class here, class LCL underscore ABC, definition, end class, right? So far, while creating the class, we are not mentioning whether the class is a public class, protected class, private class, or abstract class, right? So if you don't mention anything here, by default, the class is public. But whereas at the component level, what do you mean by component level? Within the class, whatever we declare, we call it as a component. At the component level, if we are not giving any visibility section, we are getting what? Syntax error. So it is mandatory to specify the component either in public or protected or private. But at the class level, we are not giving any visibility. Okay, so by default, the class visibility is what? Public. Okay, so this class by default is what? Public class. Just keep that in mind. Now what I'll do, within this class, I'll declare some components. It can be attributes, methods, events, whatever it is. For our flexibility, I'll go for methods. So public section, I'll take a method, instance method M1. Then protected section, I'll take the method M2. Then in the private section, I'll take the method M3. So this class contains three components. All the three components are methods. They are public, protected, and private. Let us implement all these methods. End class. Then here I'll say method M1 inside instance public method M1 of class what? LCL underscore ABC. End for method is what? End method. Done. Like this. Let us implement the other two methods. Method M2 inside instance public method M2. Sorry, inside instance protected method. M2 I declared as what? Protected. So I'm just giving the right statements here. Inside instance private method M3 of the class so on so. So far what we know, outside the class, the consumer means whoever is accessing the class components, we call them as what? Consumers. So outside the class, we know we can access only what? Public components. Protected and private components cannot be accessed outside the class. Yeah, Manoj, is my voice is audible and clear? You are disconnecting. Any issue?
Yeah,
Is it
very
fine
much
now?
clear.
Manoj. Okay, right. So see here. So I've implemented all the three methods. Right. So let me save it. Check for the syntax. I don't have any errors. Right. So I don't have any errors here. Now what I'll do is in the startup selection. So we know outside the class we can access only what? Public component. So I'll just instantiate this class data OB type ref2 LCL underscore ABC and I'll say create object what? OB. Right. Object OB1 of class what? LCL underscore ABC. So using this object, I can access only what? Instance components. I can access only instance components. I'm sorry. Objects can access either instance components or static components. Anyhow, in this case, I'm having only instance methods. and out of these three methods, only one method is public. Only this public method can be accessed outside. So I'll just say call method ob1 of what is the public instance method m1. So when I do syntax check, yeah, there is nothing to discuss here, right? Object ob1 of the class lcl underscore what abc inside instance public method m1 of class lcl underscore abc. This is understood. Now using this object, I'll try to access m2. Even though m2 is instance method, m2 is declared a protected section. Protected methods cannot be accessed outside. So when I do syntax check, we got an error. Access to protected method m2 is not allowed. So this is obviously what syntax error. Same is the case with the method m3 because m3 is what private method. So when I do syntax check, again we are getting the error. You cannot access private method m3. So what is the understanding? Outside the class, we can access only what public components. When I say outside class and class, that's what I mean to say. Okay, so that anyhow we know. Now what I'll do is within the same object, within the same program, I'll try to create one more class. I'll try to create one more class. So I'll say class lcl underscore something xyz definition end class. These two classes are independent classes. As of now, these two are independent. There is no relationship between these two classes, ABC and what? XYZ. So inside this XYZ class, I'll take one public instance method, methods m4. So this class also contains what? One method. We need to implement it. So I'll say class LCL underscore XYZ implementation end class. I'll implement this method m4 method m4 inside instance. What type of method that is? Public. Inside instance public method m4 of the class what? LCL underscore what? XYZ. So I just implemented that particular method. So as of now, these two classes are independent. There is no relationship. Now, can I access this method m4 outside? Yes, it is public. I can access. Since it is instance method, compulsory I require what? Object. So what I'll do here is I'll just create the object. Okay, I'll just create the object. Object, let me say ob2 of class what? LCL underscore what? XYZ. Sorry. Of class LCL underscore XYZ. Data ob2 type ref to what? LCL underscore what? XYZ. Create object ob2. So I've instantiated this class XYZ. Now using this ob2, I can access public components. What are the public components available in the XYZ class? Only one method is there, that is m4 method. Since it is instance, I require object. So I'll say call method. What is that? ob2 of what? m4. Save, check for the syntax, no errors. So when I execute, this is understood. So I've instantiated the class XYZ outside. Using that object ob2, I'm able to access a public method m4 of its own class XYZ. This is understood. Now what I'll do is, as of now, these two classes are independent. The only relationship between these two classes is both these classes are defined in the same object, are defined in the same program. They are defined in the same program. Now what I'll do is, in the XYZ class, we have the method m4 now. Okay, as part of this method m4 implementation, as part of this method m4 implementation, I will try to instantiate ABC class. I'll try to create the object for what? ABC class. So far, what we are doing, we are creating the objects outside the classes. Na? Something like this, we are creating the objects outside the classes. Now what I'll do, within this XYZ class method implementation, I will try to instantiate the other class. So inside this method M4, I'll try to create the object for the ABC class. Where is that ABC class is defined? Above. So I'll say data. I'll give some reference R type ref2. What is the existing class? LCL underscore ABC. When I do syntax check, I don't have any errors. I'll try to convert this reference to object. So I'll say create object what R, right? I'll say create object R. Okay, save it, check for the syntax, no error. So what is the meaning? I am able to create the object for the ABC class inside the XYZ method. Done. Now what I'll do using this, okay, I'll do one thing just for our clarity. Okay, so using this object R is the object of which class? ABC class. So outside this ABC class, I can access only public components. No? Outside any class, we can access only what? Public components. This ABC class contains what public components? It contains what? Only one public method M1. So what I'll do is here I'll say call method R of M1. Call method R of M1. I'll just close the format color off. So for our understanding, I'll say object R of class LCL underscore ABC created in what? LCL underscore XYZ method M4. That this is only for understanding. I'm just creating the object. I gave this particular statement. So using this object, I'm calling the method what? M1. M1 is anyhow public. So when I do syntax check, I don't have any errors. So when I execute, so one second, object OB1 of class LCL underscore ABC. Right. So just when I execute, okay. So what I got here, see, this is object OB2 of class LCL underscore XYZ. Now you can see here, I got object R of class LCL ABC created in XYZ. So inside instance public method M1 of the class LCL underscore what? ABC. So what is happening? What is understanding here? I am able to instantiate ABC class inside what? XYZ method. Yes, I'm able to create. And using that object, I'm able to call the public method because outside the class, I can access only what? Public components. Here also same story. Na? We are able to access what? Public components. Okay. I'm able to access the public components. Now what I'll do is using this R, what are the other components of the class ABC? ABC class contains two more components, M2 and what? M3. But they are under protected and private. So according to the concept, protected and private components cannot be accessed outside. So what I'll do here, using this object R, I'll try to access call method R of, what is that? M2. R of M2, right? So when I do syntax check, yes, I'm getting an error. Access to protected method M2 because anyhow we are outside the ABC class. Na? So outside the class, I cannot access what? Protected or private component. So this is ruled out. Okay, syntax error. Now I'll say call method R of M3. This also is ruled out now because M3 is not private. So when I do syntax check, yes, I got an error. You cannot access. So why am I unable to access? Because we're outside the class ABC. So outside the class, I cannot access the protected or what private component. So again, the same error we got. Now what I want is, I want to make this possible. I want these two statements to what work. By default, we cannot access protected and private components outside. We are when I say outside, I'm talking about outside of what? ABC class. We are inside the XYZ class, but we are outside what? ABC class. So outside any class, outside any class using the object of that class, I can access only what? Public components. I cannot access protected or private. That's what the error we got. So I want to make this possible. I want to make this possible. So how to make it possible? While creating this ABC class, I will say as part of definition, yesterday we have used some load keyword. Now I'll say friends, friends, what is the another class LCL underscore what XYZ. So what is the meaning? ABC class is considering ABC class is considering XYZ as what? Friend. So what is the meaning? Inside XYZ class methods, inside the XYZ class methods, I can access any components of ABC class irrespective of the visibility. If I don't consider it as a friend, if I don't consider as a friend, what is the default behavior inside that XYZ class? I'm able to instantiate ABC class, and using this instance, I'm able to access only what? Public component. This is in your default behavior. Now I want to access all the components irrespective of their visibility. So how to make it possible? ABC class should consider friends. What is this? XYZ class. ABC class is considering XYZ class as what? Friend. So what is the meaning of this? Inside the ABC class methods, I can access all components of ABC class irrespective of the visibility, whether public anywhere we can access with our friend also. But now I can also access what? Protected and what? Private. Okay, so let's see whether allowing or not. So I'll just uncomment this. I'll uncomment this too. Okay, so when I do syntax check, I got a different error. What is the error here? XYZ is what? Unknown. XYZ is unknown. So ABC is trying to consider XYZ class as what? Friend. But this XYZ class is defined at the bottom. Na? At the bottom. So at this stage, ABC is unable to recognize what? XYZ class. It is giving an error in the third line. What is that? XYZ is what? Unknown. Am I clear? ABC is trying to consider XYZ as a friend, but XYZ is defined somewhere else here. At this stage, ABC is unable to recognize what? XYZ. So what is that I'll do? To avoid this error, I'll do some adjustment. What is that? I will remove the definition of XYZ from the bottom. I'll remove the definition of XYZ from the bottom, only the definition. I'll keep it before what? ABC class. So that ABC class can recognize what? XYZ class. Only the definition, I am ensuring that it is available before the ABC class. So that ABC class can recognize what? XYZ class. So when I do syntax check, yes, no errors done. So when I execute, yes, you can see it. So when I execute, yeah, you can see using that object R, I am able to access what? M1, M2 and what? M3. Even though M2 and M3 are what? Protected and private, I am able to access them outside what? ABC class because of the only reason what? Friendship relationship between these two classes. So the summary is outside a class, outside any class, a object can access only what? Only what? Public components. By default, objects cannot access protected and not private components. Okay, to make it possible, we can go for what? Friend classes. Means a class can consider other classes what? Friend. A class can consider other classes what? Friend. So that inside that friend class, I can instantiate what? The source class. I can instantiate the source class, and using that instance, I mean object, using that instance, I can access all the components of the class irrespective of their visibility. But in this case, the friend class should be the friend class should be uh, what declared before the source class. It should be declared before. Then only the ABC class is able to recognize what XYZ class. Understood? But but what is the general recommendation in any object-oriented languages? The definitions and implementation should be at the same place. Na? Immediately after the definition, you will put what? Implementation. So as of now, only definition is available for XYZ. So what I'll do, I'll try to remove XYZ implementation from here. I'll try to remove XYZ implementation from here. I'll keep it after the definition. Understood? Why I'm doing like this? So that we are following the sequence, definition and implementation. But when I do syntax check here, I got a different error. ABC is unknown because inside this XYZ method, we are trying to instantiate ABC class which is not recognized. It has been defined somewhere else in the program. Understood? So if I follow that sequence, this is the issue I'm having. So what I'll do here, I'll remove this implementation from here. I'll keep it after ABC class only. But if I do like this, we are not following the recommendation. Definition is at one place, implementation is at what? Some other place. So what I'll do is, I'm not defining the XYZ class on the top. I'll define it after ABC class. So XYZ definition, then XYZ implementation. Am I clear? XYZ definition, then what? XYZ implementation, one after the other. Done. I have commented the definition on the top there, but I am getting an error. Na? What is the error I am getting here? When I do syntax check, XYZ is what? Unknown. ABC is unable to recognize what XYZ. So to avoid this error, what you have done earlier, we have removed the definition from the bottom. I kept it before what? ABC. But we are violating the recommendation. So what you have to do is, in these cases, we need to forward declare the friend classes. We need to forward declare the friend classes. How do you declare that? You'll say class LCL underscore what? XYZ definition. We have to use the keyword what? Deferred. We have to use the keyword what? Deferred. So what is the meaning of deferred? We are instructing SAP that the class definition has been delayed. It has been declared somewhere else in the object. That is the meaning of deferred. I repeat, what is the purpose of deferred keyword means? We are instructing SAP that the class definition has been delayed. It has been defined somewhere else in the object. So this deferred keyword declaration, we call it as what? Forward declaration. Forward declaration. So save it, check for the syntax, no errors, done. So when I execute, so the overall summary is, by default, outside any class, the object of that class can access only what? Public components. It cannot access protected and what? Private components. So by using these friend classes, by considering two different classes which are in friendship relationship, we can enable the accessibility of the components irrespective of the visibility. So what you have to do here, we need to consider two classes. Class A should consider class B as what? Friend. So if class A considers class B as friend, what is the meaning? Inside that class B methods, that is inside the friend class methods, I can instantiate the source class, that is class A, and using that instance, that is object, I can access all the components of class A irrespective of the visibility. But in these cases, the friend class should be forward declared by using what? Deferred keyword. Deferred keyword. Okay, if you see the documentation, I'll put the cursor on the deferred keyword. I'll press F1. Yeah, I got the deferred keyword. You can see it. This variant of the class is used to make the class known regardless of the location regardless of the location of the actual definition of the class in the program. Understood? So deferred means delayed. Deferred means delayed. Okay. So this is a usage of friend classes. Yeah. Any questions here? Please ask. No questions? Okay. So this is in case of what? Local classes. Same concept applies for what? Global class also. So what I'll do is quickly, I'll create two global classes and let us see how to consider the friendship relationship. Here we are using the keyword what? Friends. We are using the keyword friends. Okay. So let's see that. So I'll create a global class first. So I'll go to class builder. So I'll take one class ZCL underscore ABC. I think this is already there. Yeah. So I'll do one thing. I'll give it as LCL underscore ABC1. Create. I'll just give some description. It's a normal usual ABAP class only. I'm not selecting or deselecting any options here, just save it. So as part of this class ABC1, I'll declare some methods. Why I'm going for methods is so that I can give the right statements. Okay, I can go for any of the components. I'll say M1, M2, and what M3. Okay, let me declare all them as instance. This M1 method I'll declare it as public, M2 as what? Protected. Let us implement these three methods. M3 is what? Private here. I'll double click on the method M1. Let us implement this ABC1 class. Inside instance public method M1 of class what? Something ZCL underscore ABC1. Let us implement the M2 method inside instance protected method M2 of class so and so. Similarly, let us implement the method M3 inside instance private method M3 of class so and so. Done. So all the methods are implemented. Activate the class so that all the methods gets activated. So this is a simple class which contains three methods. I have done the implementation for all the three methods. I'll take another class LCL underscore XYZ1. Okay, create, provide some description. I'll save it. Done. So as part of this class, I'll take the method M4. Let us take it as public so that I can call it outside. So I'll try to implement the method M4. So inside instance public method M4 of class what LCL underscore what XYZ1. Save it. Check for the syntax. No errors. So as of now, there is no relationship between ABC1 and XYZ1 class. Now what I'll do somewhere here I'll try to create the object for what? ABC class. Data k type ref2 ZCL underscore ABC1. Create object what? K. And using this object, we know I can access only what? Public methods. ABC1 class contains one public method M1. Na? So this is allowed by default. No errors, done. Okay, it is allowing. I'll activate this. So what I did here, inside the method M4 of XYZ1 class, we are able to instantiate what? ABC1 class. Using that instance, we are able to access only the what? Public method. Suppose if I say call method K of M2. what happens? Obviously, you'll get an error. Objects cannot access what protected or private outside. So this is ruled out. Similarly, if I say call method k of m3, okay, this is also ruled out. It is not allowing me. Okay, so save, check. I have commented it. Then only I can activate. Yeah, the class is activated. Now quickly I'll instantiate this xyz1 class. So this xyz1 class contains what? One public method what? M4. How to access the public methods? Only by using what? Object. So I'll just create the object for that global class. Data, I'll say something OB type ref2. What is the global class? ZCL underscore xyz1. And I'll say create object what? OB. And using this object, I'll call that public instance method M4. Right? So when I execute this, so whenever I call the method M4, control comes to what? Method M4 implementation. Inside the method M4 implementation, we gave some write statement. We are instantiating the ABC1 class. Using that instance, I'm accessing the public method of that class, that is M1. So this will work by default. Right? This is working by default. So when I execute, yes, I got inside instance public method M4 of the class xyz1, and from there we have instantiated the ABC1 class. Using that instance, we are calling the public method M1 of the class ABC1. So I want to make this possible. What is that? Inside this method M4, I should allow this object K to access M2 and M3. Even though they are protected and private, I want to make this allow. So how to make it possible? That ABC1 class should consider xyz1 class as what friend. So in case of local classes, what we have done as part of the definition, we are using the keyword with friends. Okay, now what I'll do, I'll go back to the ABC1 class, the initial class. So inside this ABC1 class, right, inside this ABC1 class, we have a tab called as friends. Okay, inside this ABC1 class, we have a tab called as friends. I'll go to friends tab. Here I'll give the what? The xyz1 class. So what I'll do here, zcl underscore xyz1. Understood? Done. ZCL underscore XYZ1. So what is the meaning? ABC1 class is considering XYZ1 class as friend. So what is the meaning? Inside the XYZ1 class methods, I can access all components of ABC1 class irrespective of the visibility. Check for the syntax error, no errors. Activate this ABC1 class. Okay, this is the only adjustment. Go to friends tab and do that. Now go back to the xyz1 class. So since ABC1 has considered xyz1 class as friend, what I can do within that xyz1 class methods, anyhow we have instantiated the ABC1 class. Using that instance, I can access any kind of components irrespective of the visibility. No errors, done. Activate this. So when I execute, I got the M1, M2, M3 accessed inside what? XOS1 class. Understood? Here we don't have deferred keyword. Deferred keyword will be only for what? Local classes, not for global classes. And another point is the local class can consider global class as friend. The local class can consider global class as friend, but reverse is not possible because if the global class has to consider the local class as friend, we have to give the program name now because local classes are defined within a object, within a program. So here I cannot give it. So what is the meaning here? A global class can consider only what? A global class can consider only another global class as friend, whereas a local class can consider local classes as friend as well as what? Global classes. Suppose here Observe this carefully. We are having what? XYZ1 class. So this XYZ1 class I want to consider the friend here. So what I'll do here, I'll say ZCL underscore XYZ1. Let's see whether allowing or not. Save it, check for the syntax error, no errors, done. Okay, so I don't have any errors. Understood? So what happens here? If you mention a class here, first it will check whether this class is available locally within the program. It will check whether it is available locally within the program. If it is not available locally within the program, SAP will check for this class inside class pool. Understood? There is something called as class pool. We cannot see it physically. Just like function models are stored inside function group. Function models are stored inside function group. All the global classes will be stored inside what? Class pool. So what happens here? It checks for this class within the same program. If it is not available locally, it checks for that globally in the class pool. Since it is available, it is considered that also as what? Friend. Suppose if I say XYZ2 here, I'm sure there is no global class with the name XYZ2. So when I do syntax check, am I getting any error here? Yeah, it is saying that the type so and so is what? Unknown. Understood? So first it checks for locally. If it is not there locally, it checks inside what? Class pool. So what is a class pool means? We cannot see it physically. Okay, a class pool is a container of what? Global classes. All the global classes, whether it is custom global class or standard global class given by SAP, internally they are stored inside what? Class pool. Yeah, any questions here? Please ask.
So this kind of situation comes only when we want to implement private or protected methods in the global class, of global class inside the local class, this class, right? LCL underscore. The local class wants to implement that, right?
No, it's not the implementation, it's accessing. Accessing.
Yeah, accessing. Yeah. If I want to
In,
access those
yeah,
methods of private and protected of ZCLXYZ1 in LCL underscore ABC, then I can do that, right? Then
yeah.
only this.
It's only the accessing.
Yeah.
Implementation has to be done in the respective classes.
Right, right, right. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So here we can access multiple classes because you are given both local and global. So like
Yeah.
multiple classes is allowed.
Yeah,
Okay.
there
A
can be
number of
any number of
okay.
friend class, no limitation. Okay. That's what if you see the documentation also, you can see friends, okay, CF, etc. etc. There is no actually here I am going only for classes. Okay, even we can consider interfaces as friends also, but at this stage we don't know what is an interface. So when we come to interface, we can consider. So point here is no limitation. I can consider any number of local classes, any number of global classes as friends.
And performance wise, also no issues, right?
No issue, no issue. It is only exposing the protected and private components to be accessed inside what other classes.
Okay.
Okay, that's what they are saying here. See, uh, what is that? Yeah, a class can grant a friendship to other classes interfaces and thus to all access. Okay,
So here we are giving both local and global. So which one it is accessing? It is going to local first or global first?
no, it is not the
Because we
question
have
of
same thing LCL and ZCL. We have both of same kind. So which one it is taking?
no, no. It is you can give this in any order. You can give this in any order. Point here is
When we are
when
implementing, which
uh-huh.
one it is considering? It is considering local class or it is going to global class for the, because we
No,
have same both local and global. I mean same methods. We are accessing the same thing from local and global.
No, here when you're creating the object, we'll clearly mention the class name, na? So it will
Okay, okay,
differ.
okay,
It will
okay, okay.
it,
Got it.
it will identify whether it is whether it is available locally or whether it is available globally, na? You understand?
Got it. Got it.
Compulsory,
Yeah.
compulsory we have to create the object. Without the object, I cannot access. Okay, right? Right. And to be fair, I'm saying I have never used this front class in the real scenarios. But since interview point of view, we are learning this. But I never, in my last 15, 16 years, have experience on these SAP technical models. To be fair, I never use this front classes explicitly. It is only for interview purpose we are discussing this front class. Otherwise, I don't see any usage because anyhow we have inheritance. Okay, so we can go for inheritance. Right here, even if I consider friend, compulsory I have to create the object. But if you go for inheritance, I don't require object also. So that part we'll see that now. Right. Okay, so we understood something about the friend classes. Now what we'll do is next is load keyword is on. Let us go for something called as constructors. Constructors. Okay, so this is uh, important when you're working with the standard class also. This constructors is very useful. Okay, we should understand the concept related to what constructors. So as the name itself suggests, constructor means what? It is used for constructing the object. What is the default behavior so far? What we know, if you have instance and static and what constant attributes, the static attributes and constant attributes gets initialized to their default values whenever the class is loaded into the memory. When the class is loaded into the memory, the moment you start the program execution, all the classes which you have defined in your program will be loaded into the memory. Whenever the class is loaded into the memory, the default behavior is what? For static and constant attributes, memory will be allocated and they get initialized to default values depending on the what data types. And we know that instance attributes memory will be allocated only when we instantiate the class, only when we create the object. So what is my requirement is, the moment I create the object, I want to associate some default values in the object. So for that kind of implementation, we'll go for constructors. You can visualize this constructor similar to initialization event. So in a normal ABAP programming, as part of your objects, as part of your reports, we might handle initialization event. What is the purpose of the initialization event? To initialize the selection screen fields, we will handle the initialization event. Means when I execute the program, the selection screen, if we are having any parameters or select option statements, the selection screen gets generated. So on that selection screen, you might have some elements. That elements you want to initialize. So where do we write that initialization logic? As part of what initialization event? We know that initialization event gets executed only once in the lifetime of the entire selection screen. Similarly, constructor also will be executed only once. So again, for this constructors, we have the classification: instance constructor and static constructor. Earlier last week we have discussed normal methods: instance method, instance normal method, static normal method. Similarly, for constructors also we have the classification: instance constructor and what else? Static constructor. Okay, so let's see that. So first, whether it is local class or global class, the concept will be same. Right. So just observe this carefully. A very simple example. LCL underscore customer definition. Okay, as part of this class, in the public section or in the protected section, whatever it is, or let me go for protected otherwise. In the protected section, I'll declare some attributes like customer ID, type what I. I'll declare another attribute like customer name of 20, type C. Okay, done. Now what I'll do in the public section, I'll take some two methods set and display. Some method name set and display. I need to implement what? Both the methods. LCL underscore customer implementation. Yeah, I'll implement set method. Similarly, I'll implement what? Display method. Yeah, right. So set method and what? Display method. Now what I'll do is inside this set method, I will initialize my attributes. Customer ID equal to, I'll say something 123. I'll say customer name equal to something, so on. So then inside this display method, I'll try to print the values of the attributes, customer ID and what? Customer name. So nothing to discuss here. One method is initializing the attributes. Another method is displaying the values of the attributes. Done. Then in the start of selection, yeah, observe this. Can I access? It can be private or protected, doesn't matter. Okay. So here, can I access these two things outside? No, because they're under what? Private. They're under private, I cannot access. Can I access these two methods outside? Yes, they're public, I can access. What kind of methods they are? Instance methods. So since they are instance, compulsory I require what? Object. Okay, so let me create the object for my class. I'll say data. Okay, I can go for this or I can go for the new syntax which we already know. Data OB equal to new. What is the class name? LCL underscore what? Customer. LCL underscore customer. Done. So save it. Check for the syntax, no errors. Let me give the object name as OB1. So what is the point we know so far? The moment you create, the moment we instantiate the class, the moment we create the object for the class, what happens? Memory gets allocated for what? Instance attribute, and they get initialized to default values. So what happens in this case? The moment you create the object OB1, on behalf of this object OB1, memory gets allocated for both those attributes. What are the attributes here? One is customer ID, another is what? Customer name. Customer ID is what type? Integer. So by default it gets initialized to 0. Customer name is character. By default it will initialize to what? Space. This is the memory allocated for the instance attribute on behalf of which object? Object what? OB1. So this is understood. The moment we instantiate the class, where is it? Not this. Yeah, the moment we instantiate the class, memory gets allocated for the instance attributes and they get initialized to what? Default value. So that is what is happening here. I got 0 and what? Space. The current values of the object OB1 is 0 and space. Now using this object OB1, I'll try to call the methods outside. Let me call display method. What is the job of the display method? It has to print the values of what? Cust ID and cust name. So internally, how it will interpret me of cust ID, me of what? Cust name. Me refers to what? Current object. So I'll just say OB1 of what? Display. Understood? I can say call method or I am using the Java syntax. Anything is fine. I can say call method OB1 of display or I'm using the other syntax OB1 of display. So when I execute this, observe this carefully. Object OB1, right? Object OB1. Done. I'll switch off the color. format color off. So save it, check for the syntax, no errors. So when I execute, what happened here? Object OB1, customer ID is 0, customer name is what? Space. So if I quickly debug, I'll put the breakpoint here. I'm putting the breakpoint. When I execute, yeah, I'll go to desktop 3. So object is not yet created. So if you see OB1, what happened? It is still what? Initial. And I'll say, if I simply say cust ID, it is not recognizing. If I say cust name, it is not recognizing. Even if I say OB1 of what? Cust ID, what is happening here? It is still not recognized because memory is not yet allocated. If I say OB1 of cust name also, it is not recognizing. Okay, right. Now I'm trying to instantiate. So when I instantiate, what happens? The memory gets allocated for what? Instance attributes. So when I say fi, yes, what happened here? See, OB1 of cust ID is 0, OB1 of custom is space. Make clear, I cannot access them, I cannot refer them independently. I must refer either through object or through class. Class means it should be either static or constant. If it is instance, compulsory it should be what? Object. Right. So what is the current value? 0 and what? Space. Now what I am doing? Using that object OB1, I'm calling the display method. Control goes to display implementation. It is going to 20th line. We are printing cust ID and cust name. Internally, it will interpret as what? Me of cust ID and me of what? Cust name. Me of custody and me of cust name. Me refers to what? Current object which is executing this particular block. Which object is executing this block display? OB1. So internally it will interpret as what? OB1 of cust ID, OB1 of cust name, which is 0 and space. So when I say F8, yes, I got 0 and space. So what is the understanding is, the moment you create the object, the default behavior is memory gets allocated for the instance attributes and they get initialized to what? Default values depending on their data types. Numerics to zeros, characters to what? Space. So what I want here, my requirement is, the moment you create the object, I don't want those default values. Instead, I want to initialize my own values. So here, where you are doing the initialization, we are doing that in another method set now, but I'm not getting 123 and Raj because we are not calling the set method. So if you want that 123 and Raj explicitly, we have to call. It is a normal method. I need to call it explicitly. Since it is also instance, I must call it by using the object. So when I say OB1 of set, now the control goes to set method. It will interpret as what? Me of custody and me of custom. So this default values would be overwritten with what? 123 and what? Raj. Understand? It will overwrite this 0 and space without 123 and what? Raj. Then if you want that values again I have to call that a display method now. Then only I'll get the current values. So before calling the set method, at this stage we will get 0 space. After calling the set method, 0 space will be overwritten with 123 and Raj. Again when you call the display method, what are the current values? 123 and what? Raj. So that is what is happening here. So when I execute, yes, I got 0 space first, then I got 123 and what? Raj. Right. So before I go further, any questions so far? Okay. Right. So where we are now? We understood this behavior earlier also. Now what is the change I'll do is, my expectation is, the moment you create the object, I want some values to be initialized in my instance attribute. Okay. So what you have to do in this case is, we'll go for constructor. Okay. Whenever you want to do any initialization, as and when we create the object, that initialization logic we will implement as part of a constructor. So what is a constructor? A constructor is a special method. A constructor is a special method, okay, which can be used to initialize the attributes of the class. Why it is special? Because it is automatically executed. It is automatically called as and when we create the object. So if you know Java, in case of Java, if or in even C++ also, if the method name and class name are same, if the method name and class name are same, we call that method as what constructor. So here, in case of Java and C++, suppose set method is there. Here I'll say LCL underscore customer. So the method name is same, the class name is also same. So this is called as what constructor. This is called as constructor in case of C++ and what Java. Compulsory the constructor name should be same as that of what class name. But if you take our normal if you take our ABAP programming language, so in the initial slide we have discussed that. What is that? If you take this method section, we have special methods. Under special methods we have what? Instance constructor and static constructor. So first let us focus on instance. Forget about the static. By end of today's session we'll understand static constructor. So I'll go for what? Instance constructor. So instance constructor is also a method. Constructor is also a method. So how do we declare instance methods? By using methods keyword only, na? By using methods keyword. I'm talking about the local classes. And since I want the instance constructor, the method name should be what? Constructor. The method name should be constructor. So anything declared, if the method name is constructor, we call that as what? Instance constructor. This is called as what? Instance constructor. So what I'll do now? Here I'll say what? Instead of set method, I'll put the method name as constructor. Done. Now see the change here. I'll just comment all these things. Yeah, I removed it. So I'm creating the object. I'm creating the object. Now onwards, I'll change my sentence. Whenever we create the object for any class, when I say any class, it can be a custom class, standard class, anywhere, not only here, not only in our normal ABAP, it can be in ALV reporting, CRM technical, HR ABAP, ABAP on UI5, wherever it is. Whenever we create the object for any class, SAP will check whether that class contains any instance constructor. Okay, if the instance constructor is available, it will execute the instance constructor. Okay, so what is the meaning? The instance constructor gets executed automatically the moment you create the object. So the moment the statement is executed, since the constructor is available, control goes to what? This implementation. So by default, you'll have what? Zero and what? Space. Now the control will automatically jump to what? Constructor. Okay, this attributes gets initialized to what? 123 and Raj. This constructor is getting executed on behalf of which object? Object what? OB1. So it will interpret as what? OB1 of custody, OB1 of nothing but me of custody, me of custom. So what happens here? This zero and space would be overwritten with what? Something 123 and what? Raj. So what is the point you have to understand? If it is a normal method, I must call the method explicitly. If it is a constructor, constructor will be automatically executed the moment you create the object. Then we have another normal method. Na? What is the normal method? I mean display. This is a special method. Constructor is called a special method. Normal method means we have to call it explicitly. How do I call it now? I'll say call method so and so, or I'll use the syntax OB1 of what? Display. That's it. So save it, check for the syntax. In the earlier execution, what I got? Zero and space. Now when I execute, what happened here? I got 123 and what? Raj. Let me debug this. I'll put the breakpoint here. Execute. So object is not yet created. Object is about to be created. So if you see this OB1, it is still initial. Memory is not yet allocated for cust ID and what? Cust name. Cust ID and what? Cust name. It is saying what? Invalid. They are not yet recognized. So the moment you create the object, what happens? Same story. Memory gets allocated for the instance attribute. They get initialized to default values on behalf of that object. And in this case, since the constructor is available, the control will be automatically jumping to the constructor implementation and executes that. So see here, when I say F5, see this right hand side first. When I say F5, what happened here? Oh, what is the issue? One second. One second, please. OB1 of what? Cust ID. OB1 of what? Cust name. As of now, it is not initially done. Now I'm saying F5. Control is going there. Okay. See, it is not showing this. I'll say F5. Okay. Let's say F5. When I call the display method, okay. One second, please. Just want to analyze something here. I'll say F8. F5. Okay. Okay. Right. Okay. Right. So I got 123 and Raj. Then I'm calling display method. Okay. So I'll do one thing. There's small change in the analysis here. I'll do one thing. So we are creating this object like this. Just for better clarity, I'll go for the normal approach, then I'll come back to this. I'll say data OB1 type ref2. What is the class name? LCL underscore customer. Create object. What I want to show is, what is that I told? The moment you create the object, what happens? The attributes gets initialized to a default values, that is zeros and what? Space. In the debugging, I am unable to show that zero and space because I use a new syntax. That is the reason I am shifting to the old syntax. Just want to show you that zero and space initially. So when I execute, yeah, I'll put the breakpoint here. Execute. So if you see this OB1, it is initial. If I say OB1 of cust ID, yes, it is not recognized. OB1 of cast name, it is not recognized. Done. Now I'm trying to create the object. I'm trying to create the object. So the moment you create the object, what happens? The attributes memory will be allocated. They get initialized to what default values. What is the default is zero and what space. After that, control jumps to what? That particular instance constructor. There that logic gets executed. The default values will be overwritten with the initialized values. So when I say F5 here, this is what I want to show. See in this syntax, what happened here? See, I'm able to show you what? The default values. Here also same story. What happened? First it is initialized to what? Zero and what? Space. You can see right hand side, zero and space. Then what happens? The control is jumping to the constructor implementation. This zero will be overwritten with 123. Space will be overwritten with what? Raj. So when I say F5, done. Zero got overwritten with 123. Space gets overwritten with what? Raj. Done. Next, I'm calling the normal method what? Display. Control goes to display method. It will print that customer ID and customer name. So if I use that new syntax, okay, if I use a new syntax, I am unable to show you that zero and space. That is the only change. Otherwise, the functionality is same. Understood? If I comment this, observe this carefully. Okay, so in only one step we are able to create the object. Na? So see what happens here. I am unable to show you that zero and space in the debugging mode. In the debugging mode. So if I put the breakpoint here, when I execute, yeah, if you see this OB1, it is initial. If you see OB1 of cust ID, and what else? OB1 of what? Cust name. OB1 of cust name. It is what? Not recognized. So now you can see when I say FI, okay, control is going to the construct implementation. But in the earlier case, in the old syntax, we are able to see this zero and space in. But here, what is happening is it is not at what showing those values. Okay, because in the single step we are creating the reference and the object. Once that complete statement gets executed, then it will show this memory allocation. That is the only change. So here also the control is jumping toward constructor. Okay, when I say fi here, directly it is storing what? 123. It is not yet showing me here because it is not yet executed that complete statement. Once this constructor execution is finished, once the control comes out of this, okay, now you can see still it is showing what? Nothing. Invalid it is saying. When the control executes the statement completely, when the control goes here, then it will show you that latest values 123 and what? Raj. That is what the analysis I have done. Done. I got 120. But here also same thing. Internally, it will have what? Zero and space. That zero and space will overwritten with what? 123 and what? Raj. So I got the output one. So what is the meaning here? The constructor is getting executed what? Automatically. We are not calling it explicitly. Another point here. This is under what section? Public section. I will try to call the constructor explicitly. So far we know what public components can be accessed outside. Na? Any of this constructor is public. I'll try to call it. I'll try to call it. So I'll say OB1 of what? Constructor. I'll try to call that OB1 of constructor. When I do syntax check, what is the error I got? See, I got an error. You cannot call the special method constructor directly. So what is the meaning? Even though constructor is a public method, I cannot call it what explicitly. They are called implicitly as and when we create the object, as and when we instantiate the class. Another point. Now, wantedly, I'll remove this constructor from here. I'll declare it wantedly in what? Private section. Okay, I'll declare that in the private section. Constructor, I'm declaring that in what? Private section. Let me close this. Okay, when I do syntax check, what is the error I got here? Visibility of the constructor must not be more specialized than the visibility of the instance creation. So what is the meaning here? It is not allowing me to declare the constructor in the private section. I'll do one thing just for clarity. I'll remove this from here. I'll declare that in what protected section. Okay, I'm trying to declare the constructor in the protected section. When I do syntax check, again I got the same error. It is still loading that. Yeah, again I got the same error in the seventh line. Visibility of the constructor must not be more specialized than the visibility of the instance creation. Some may say I got create addition. So what is the meaning here so far? I am unable to declare the constructor in what protected and what private section. Understood? I can declare it only in the public section here. So this I'll put it as what? Constructor. So what is the point you have to understand here? Constructors are always declared in what? Constructors are always declared in public section, and constructor will be automatically called the moment we create the object for the class. The moment you create the object for the class. Understood? Suppose now I'll say I'll create another object. I'll create another object OB2 equal to new so and so. So what happens on behalf of this new object? Again, the constructor gets what? Executed. So if I create 100 objects, 100 times, sorry, 100 times the constructor gets what? Executed. So again, same story here. OB2, this is the memory allocated on behalf of that new object. What is this? Cust ID and what? Custom. This is anyway internally it will be 0 and space. That 0 and space would be overwritten with what? 123 and what? Raj. So same values. So this is 123 and what? Raj. This is the memory allocated and we are for which object here? OB2. So if I create 100 objects, 100 times the instance constructor gets what? Executed. So I'll try to call the display method using the object what? OB2. Again, obviously you'll get the same values. When I execute, I got same 123 and what? Raj. So what are the points you have to understand so far is constructor is a special method which is automatically executed whenever we create the object for the class. Whenever we instantiate the class, the constructor gets what? Executed. And what is the other point here? Constructors cannot be called explicitly. Constructors cannot be called explicitly, even though it is public. I cannot call it explicitly. They are implicitly called as and when we instantiate the class. And what is the other point we understood? Constructors should be declared only in what? Public section. Okay, and what is the purpose of constructor? Whenever you want to do initialization, as and when you create the object, you'll go for what? Constructor. So what I'm trying to say here is, when you create any custom classes in your project, no one will tell us whether to go for constructor. We have to take the call. The moment you create the object, if you want any initialization to happen, that initialization business logic will implement it as part of what? Constructor. Okay. And yesterday we have seen normal methods. That is, I've taken one normal method. We know that normal method can contain 4 types of parameters: importing, exporting, changing, returning. Any of you might have not discussed changing anything, but we know that a normal method can contain 4 types of parameters. Now here also let's see whether the constructor can have any parameters. So before I do that, any questions please ask. Yeah, Giri, tell me. Yeah, Giri, you are unmuted earlier. Any questions?
So can we change the values for the constructor after calling? I mean to say after object initialized, the automatically constructor will call. Cannot change the constructor values. I mean to say initialized values.
Yeah, constructor will constructor will be called only once in the lifetime of every object. Okay. What you can do is if you want that kind of requirement, just to show that, I'll take another method M1. I'll take another normal method M1. I'll try to implement the method M1. Okay. So inside that normal method, you do whatever you want. I'll give this as something 13. This I'll give something Raj 13. Okay. So what happens here? I'm creating the object here. In this case, what happens? Constructor gets executed. Initial values will be what? 123 and Raj. When I call the display method, obviously you'll get 123 and Raj. After that, I will call the normal method M1. So that 123 and Raj will be overwritten because we are calling it by using the same object. Na? That 123 Raj got initialized on behalf of which object? OB1. Now I'm calling the normal method where I'm changing that values. Again, if you want that values to be displayed, again you call the display method. But within the constructor will be executed only once in the lifetime of the class. So you can see here, I got initially 123 Raj, next I got 13 and what? Raj 13. Giri, is it clear?
You had made the call for M1 in below.
Yeah, I did. I called it. I
Okay,
must call it.
okay. And second thing,
So,
we'll have a
yeah,
destructor in C++ or Java, right? Here for constructor,
yeah.
destructor is
In case of Java and C plus environment, we have the support of destructors explicitly. Here we don't have any destructor support explicitly. The moment the program execution is finished, the object will be automatically destroyed. But there we have explicit support for destructors. There what we will do, just before the method, we'll use some tilde symbol. Then it is considered what destructor. Here we don't have destructor support explicitly, but going forward, we will see one method called as free statement basically. This free statement will act as destructor. If you want to explicitly destroy any object, I can use what a statement called as free. Any of that we'll discuss later on.
okay, so very much clear. Thank you.
So point here is constructor will be called only once in the lifetime of every object. In the lifetime of every object. Understood? For each object, a instance constructor will be executed only once in the lifetime. Just like initialization event will be triggered only once in the lifetime of what? Entire selection screen. Where is the error? Yeah. Okay, I'm not remembered. So just like initialization gets executed only once in the lifetime of what? Entire selection screen. Similarly, a instance constructor will be executed only once in the lifetime of what? Each object. So what I mean to say is, this is a special method. This is a normal method. Can I call the display method again and again by using the same object? It is my wish. I can call a normal method any number of times. I can call the same display method by using the same object OB1. Okay, no limitation. So when I execute, I got it what? Twice. But whereas a instance constructor cannot be called explicitly and implicitly will be called only once in the lifetime of each object. If I create 100 objects, yes, obviously 100 times the instance constructor gets what? Executed. Yeah, any other questions please before I proceed? So what is the point here? What is the point we understood in this example is, I am able to declare the constructor only in what? Only in what? Public section. Only in the public section. Okay. So I'll do one thing. You may get confused. One second. Okay. So observe this carefully. Just a minute, please. I have not yet discussed, but yeah. So one second. Let me execute. Right. So observe this carefully. What is the point I told earlier? Constructor, I'm able to declare only in the public section. Now I'm changing my sentence. Okay, in the private section, I'm able to declare what? What? Constructor. Okay, because my class visibility is also what? Private. So first of all, focus is when I do syntax check, am I getting any errors? No. So what is the meaning? I'm I'm able to declare the constructor in what? Private section. I'll do one more change. Yeah, I declare the class as what? Private. I'm declaring the constructor in which section? Protected section. So when I do syntax check, I don't have any errors. So what is the meaning? I'm able to declare the constructor also in what? Protected section or in what? Private section. Okay, so keep this in mind. I will come back to this later on after completing inheritance, polymorphism, abstract classes. Okay, so as of now, the point you have to understand is, let me remove all these things. When I do syntax check, so see here what I did here, I declare the constructor in which section? Public section. Why I have to declare this in public section is, at the beginning of today's session, I told that at the class level also, I can give the visibility like public, protected, private, and what? Abstract. So far, I'm not giving any visibility. So by default, the visibility for any class is what? Public. So since since the visibility of my class is public, the constructor should be declared in what? Public section. So what I mean to say is, the visibility of the constructor depends on the visibility of what? Class. What is the default visibility of any class? Public. Since the class is public, constructor also should be declared in what? Public section. If the class is private, constructor can be declared in what? Private section. Okay, suppose here I'll say create what? Private. Done. Save it. Check for the syntax error. Ah, I'm getting a different error here. One second. One second, please. Save it. Check for the syntax. I don't have any error. So observe here. What is the visibility of my class? Private class. I gave the class as private, but I gave the constructor in public section. Is it allowing? Yes, it is allowing. Now I'll create the class as protected. I'll create the class as protected. Save it. Check for the syntax. I don't have any error. So what is the meaning? What is the meaning? If the class is public, if the class is public, constructor should also be in what? Public. Okay, understood? If the class is private, the constructor can be declared in what? Any of the section. If the class is protected, the constructor can be declared in what? Either protected or public. I'll come back to that statement later on. You'll get confused. But as of now, what you have to understand is, the visibility of the class depends upon the what? So the visibility of the constructor depends upon the visibility of what? Depends on the visibility of what? Class. So if the class is public, you declare the constructor also in what? Public section, right? More about protected and private, we need to discuss after a few hours. You will get deviated. But as of now, I am forced to declare this constructor in the public section because the visibility of my class is what? Public. So if the visibility is public, I cannot declare the constructor in what? Protected and what? Private section. Am I clear to everyone? So why I'm covering this at this stage is, let me go to the documentation. Observe this carefully. I'll say constructors. What is the spelling? Constructors in ABAP. Yeah, constructors in ABAP. Let me open the standard documentation. If I click on this, yeah, observe the standard documentation. Constructors are special methods that produced a defined initial. The sentence would be complex, so don't try to understand each and everything here. The constructors are special methods that produce a defined initial state for objects and classes. The state of an object is determined by so and so. Yeah, like normal methods, there are two types of constructors. What are they? Instance constructors and static constructor. We don't know anything about static at this stage, leave it. Okay, special rules apply to constructors in inheritance. Again, we don't know inheritance, please ignore this. Yeah, now I can see it. Instance constructor, each class has one instance constructor. This is a predefined instance method of the class called what? Constructor. To use the instance constructor, the method must be okay, done. Okay, I'm just trying to show you. Yeah, you can see it. In global classes, they're talking global classes. In global classes, the instance constructor can be declared in the public visibility area only, it seems. In global classes, the instance constructor can be declared in the public visibility or area only. For technical reasons, in local classes, the visibility section in which the instance constructor can be declared must be more general or equal to the instantially defined by the addition create of the statement class. So what is the meaning of this syntax is, in case of local classes, the visibility of the constructor depends upon the visibility of the class. So what is the meaning? If the class is public, constructor should be declared in what? Public section. If the class is protected or private, if the class is protected, assume it can be declared in what? Any of the sections. Similarly, if the class is private, again the constructor can be declared in any of the section. But if the class is public, constructor should be only in what? Public. Other things we'll focus later on. So what they are saying, it is special method. Why it is special method? Because they are automatically called whenever we create the object. Even though in this case the constructor is public, I am unable to call it explicitly. If I try to call it explicitly here in the 34th line, what is the error message I got here? You cannot call the special method directly. So this is ruled out, right? So before I continue further, any questions, please ask.
Sridhar?
Yeah, Anand, tell me.
Yeah. Suppose if I say class LCL underscore customer definition create protected, if we give it,
Mhm.
the constructor has to be in protected section.
Not
If it
compulsory.
is,
It can mean public. It can mean public also.
it can be public or protected, but it
Protected,
cannot be
correct.
in private, right? It cannot be in
Yeah, it
private.
cannot be private. Yes, yes.
But if it is private, then the constructor can be either in public or protected or private.
Or private.
Right.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Because private has got the higher visibility.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Anyhow, I'm not focusing much on that at this stage. Next week, when we come to the what inheritance, polymorphism, those areas, then I'll focus on that part. Okay. Yeah. Any
Okay.
other
Thanks.
doubts, others? Yeah. Others, any questions? Okay. Now what I'll do is, in this example, if you observe, we are hard coding the values now. Within the program only, we are hard coding the values. I don't want to hard code the values. I want to pass these values dynamically. Okay, instead of hard coding the values within the program, I want the user to input this value. So I want to pass parameters to my constructor. Yesterday, we have seen a normal method can contain what? Importing parameter, exporting parameter, changing or returning. We are not seeing the example on changing or returning, but understand that a normal method can contain those four kind of parameters: importing, exporting, changing, and returning. So now what I'll do, the same example I'll just slightly modify. The only agenda is what? I don't want to hard code these values in the program. I want to pass these values. I want to pass parameters to my constructor. So I'll just make a copy of this. 12 I'll copy to 13. I copied the 12 to 13. Yeah. So what is the change I'll do? What is the job of a constructor generally? To initialize the attributes of the class. How many attributes my class is having? Two attributes. So since I want to initialize both the attributes, let me take two parameters for my constructor. So I'll say importing I underscore customer ID type I. I'll take another parameter I underscore CNAME type out C. So what I'm doing here, for the instance constructor, I have taken two what? Mandatory param. By default, we know importing parameters are mandatory. Done. So what I'll do now inside hard coding here, I'll assign the parameters I underscore CID. What is the other parameter? I underscore what? CNAME. So what are the parameters? The instance constructor is importing. I'm using those parameters to initialize my attributes. Okay, done. Now see the changes here. Yeah. So observe this. I'll try to create the object. So now remember, I'm changing my sentences now. Whenever we create the object for any class, irrespective of whether it is normal ABAP, UI5, ANA, wherever it is, whenever we create the object for any class, when I say any class, it can be custom or standard class. We have to check whether the class contains any instance constructors. If the class contains any instance constructor, we need to check whether that instance constructor contains any mandatory parameters. If it contains mandatory parameters, we must supply the values for those mandatory parameters at the time of creating the object. So this point is very important. Try to focus. Whenever we are trying to create the object for any class, we need to check whether the class contains any instance constructor with mandatory parameters. In case if it contains, we must supply the values for those mandatory parameters at the time of creating the object. So in this case also, I'll try to create the object, and what is the analysis? This class contains one instance constructor with the two mandatory parameters. So I'll try to create the object either with the new syntax or old syntax, anything is fine. I'll say data ob1 equal to what? New LCL underscore what? Customer. Done. So what I'm doing here, I'm creating the object, but I'm not supplying the values for those mandatory parameters. So when I do syntax check, good. What is the error I got in the 29th line? The obligatory parameter I underscore CID had no value assigned to it. So it is expecting the value for that. So what I'll do here, since I need to pass the value, let me read the input from the user. So I'll say parameters p underscore something CID type I. I'll take another parameter p underscore CNAME of type C. Done. Then here I'll say what are the two parameter names? I underscore CID, I underscore CNAME. So I'll say I underscore CID equal to P underscore CID. So out of two parameters, I'm supplying value only for what? One mandatory parameter. So when I do syntax check, one second please. So when I do syntax check here, I got an error. So let me comment it for your reference. Right. So what I'll do now, I'll pass the value for one of the mandatory parameter. I'm going by the error. It is showing the error saying that I underscore CID had no value assigned to it. So I'm supplying the value. Save it. Check for the syntax. I got a different error. I underscore CNAME and no parameter assigned. So this also is giving what? Syntax error, because by default the importing parameters are what? Mandatory. So I'll say P underscore CNAME. Done. Save it. Check for the syntax. I don't have any error. So what is the meaning here? If the class contains any instance constructor, we must pass the values for those parameters at the time of creating the object for the class. Then what is the other method I'm having? Display. Na? Display is a normal method. Na? So a normal method should be called what? Explicitly. So here I'll say right here I'll say call method ob1 of what is that method name? Display, or I'll use other syntax. ob1 of what? Display. Display doesn't have any mandatory parameters. Done. Save it. Check for the syntax and no errors. Done. Execute this. When I say F8, yes, I'll read some values. I got what? 88 and what? Raj. So what is the summary of this? We must supply the values for those constructors at the time of creating the object itself. So I can do like this. I'll try to import na. So here I'll say what? Export. Let me check whether I can use like this. Exporting so and so. It is not allowing. It is not allowing. Import while calling becomes what? Export. It is not allowing. Yeah. It is not allowing this. Okay. It is giving an error. Field exporting is unknown. Okay. It is not allowing me. But I can say like this. Or okay, we know the other way of creating the object na. Data ob1 type ref. What is the class? LCL underscore what? Customer. What else? Create object. What is that? Create object ob1. If I give like this, obviously will get an error na, because we are not supplying the values. Okay, so this is giving me what? Syntax error. So here I must use that create object what? ob1. Also what? Exporting. What is the parameter? I underscore CID equal to P underscore CID. I underscore what? CNAME equal to P underscore CNAME. Done. Save it. Check for the syntax. No errors. Execute. Right. So I got so and so values. Is it clear? So anything is fine. Whichever you feel comfortable, you use that syntax. Anything is fine. So what is the point here? Before we create the object for any class, check whether the class contains any instance constructor with mandatory parameters. If it contains mandatory parameters, we must pass the values for those parameters at the time of creating the object itself. If I create 100 objects, yes, 100 times you have to pass the values for those particular parameters. Yeah, any questions in this part?
Yes, Sridhar sir. For example, the constructor will not have exporting or returning, right?
Yeah, I'll come back to that. I'll come to that.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Constructor never returns values. Constructor never returns values. So what I'll do is here, just to show you that, I'll say methods so and so. I've taken what two importing parameters. I'll say something exporting something e underscore something x type I. So I'm trying to return the value, exporting e underscore x type I. So when I do syntax check, I got an error. Constructors may only have what? Importing parameters and exceptions. Okay, exceptions we don't know at this stage. We'll see it going forward. So it is clearly saying that it can contain only importing parameters. It cannot contain even changing parameters. It cannot contain exporting parameters. It cannot contain returning parameters. It can contain only importing parameters and exception. So what is the point is constructor never returns values. How do you return a value from any method? Either through exporting or through returning or through changing. Changing also will act as what? Both import and what? Export. So since in any object-oriented languages, constructor never returns values. In ABAP also a construct. When I say constructor, clearly mention that as what instance constructor. So instance constructor can have only what importing parameters and exceptions. Exceptions we'll be seeing that going forward. Yeah, Giri, is it clear? Any other
Uh,
questions?
yeah. Now instance constructors uh, can have only importing parameters, will not return value. But for a case, I have importing parameters have values. I have certain code I will write inside the constructor, and depending on the import parameters, I calculate something which and I'll assign it to an attribute, and that can I access it in another method?
Yes,
I
that
can do
that
that.
is applicable. Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Uh,
because
uh,
attributes are accessible across the methods of the class.
right. Means not only initialization, certain part of the code can be written inside the constructor, and
Yes.
if I want to access a value from that constructor, that should be declared as an attribute. We
See,
can do that.
anyhow, when I say initialization here I'm directly
Yeah.
initializing. What you are saying
Yeah.
is you are doing some calculation and
Right.
initializing. At
Yeah.
the end, you are anyhow initializing the attribute only, na? And that
Yeah. Yeah.
attribute I can access anywhere.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other queries, others? Here, actually, if you see the error here, I don't know why they gave like that. Here, if you see the error message, it is saying what constructors may only have what importing parameters and actually it is not, it should be specific what instance constructor may only have importing parameters and exceptions because static constructors cannot have importing parameters also. So I don't know why they gave the error message like this. It should be more specific. Instance constructor may only have what importing parameters and exceptions. If you take static constructor, it cannot have even importing parameters also. Okay, no, we'll see that now.
Maybe if you use class constructor, it will show specific message.
It will show different message there. Here, what I'm expecting is here they could have given it as what instance constructor, but they gave it as constructors here. So when we say constructors here, we may have feeling that it can be instance and what static. Okay, then they gave it generic here. It should be specific. Okay, yeah, we'll go for static now and we'll see what the message we'll get. Yeah, any other doubts apart from this?
Yes,
Sure.
sir. Yeah. Can constructor can call other methods of the class?
Again the same concept applies. Here, what kind of constructor this is? Instance, right? So instance methods, already we know last week, instance methods can access any kind of what? Component. Okay, so what is the understanding? It can call any other methods or it can access any kind of attribute. Just for confirmation, I'll do one thing. Yeah, anyhow, I'll do one thing. Display method, I'm calling it outside now. I'm calling it outside. Within this constructor only, I'll try to call the display method. I'll simply say display, right? Anyhow, display is public. I can call it outside, but just to confirm, I'm trying to call the display within the constructor. So as per the conceptual thing, it should be very much possible. So when I do syntax check, no errors, done. So when I execute, I'll enter some values. I'm getting the result. I'm calling a display method within that constructor. I'll do one more change. I'll declare this as static methods. And according to the concept we know, instance methods can access any kind of component. Any kind of, it can be instance or static. So I'm trying to call a static method inside the constructor. So if it is the instance normal method, already we have seen last class, instance normal methods can access any kind of component without the restriction. Now this is instance constructor. Let me check any restriction is there. Good. This is a different story again. I'll just comment this. So see here, why I'm getting this error is this display I declared as a static method. Na? So already we know static methods cannot access instance components. Na? These two are instance. So I'm trying to access these two inside display. That's why it is giving the error. So as of now, I'll just give some message only. So when I do syntax check, no errors. So execute. I'm able to call, sorry. I'm able to call the static method also. So what is the meaning here? Instance constructor can access any kind of component without any limitation. Kishore, is it clear?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Thank you.
So I'll do the necessary changes. Yeah. Others, any questions, please ask. So why this is important is when you're working with the standard classes, for example, let me go to standard classes given by SAP or what global classes. So if I go to class builder, I'm having a class like CL underscore GUI underscore. There are thousands of classes. One of the class I'll take CL underscore GUI underscore what? Simple underscore tree. Okay. So if I display this class, what is this class? It is a public class. So public class means I can create the object. So blindly we should not create the object. We have to check whether this class contains any instance constructor with the mandatory parameters. So I'll go to what methods, because constructor is a method only. Na? So in the methods tab, I'll search for what? Instance constructor. Find next. Yeah, yes. We are having what? Instance constructor. I need to check whether this instance constructor contains any what? Mandatory parameters. So if I put the cursor, if I go to parameters, yes, observe this carefully. It has got two parameters which are mandatory. Na? The optional checkbox is not selected for second parameter and fourth parameter. So it is not mandatory. And you can observe here, they are not mentioning whether this is importing, exporting, changing, returning, because a constructor, instance constructor can always contain what? Importing parameters. Na? That's why they didn't get a segregation. All these parameters by default are importing. So since there are two mandatory parameters here, at the time of creating the object for this class, we must supply the values for these two mandatory parameters. Depending on the type of the parameter, we have to supply the appropriate values. Okay, like this, you take any standard class, you have to check further. Suppose I'll go to a class CL underscore GUI underscore ALV underscore grid, right? So if I see the visibility of this class, it is public. So yes, I can create the object. Before creating, check for what? Constructor. Go to methods. I'll search for constructor. Find next. Yes, we have the constructor. Does it any parameters? Yes, it has got many parameters. Out of many parameters, One of the parameters mandatory. The third one is what? Mandatory. The optional checkbox is not selected. So we must supply the value for this particular mandatory parameter at the time of creating the object for any object for this particular class. Okay. Right. Now quickly we'll understand the difference between instance constructor and static constructor. So far what I was saying, before creating the object for any class, we need to check the existence of what? Instance constructor. I need not check the existence of static constructor because static constructor never contains parameters. That is the reason. That is the reason we need not worry about the existence of what? Static constructor. Always focus on what? Instance constructor. Okay. So let me take a class which contains both instance and what? Static. Let us try to understand the difference. So what are the concept I told here? This concept will remain same for global class also. I'll take a class ABC definition end class. Now, since this class is public by default, I must declare the constructor in what? Public section. So the public section, I'll say what? Methods. How to declare instance constructor? Static constructor means how to declare static methods? Class methods. So I'll take what? Class underscore what? Constructor. So my class contains both instance constructor and static constructor. Let me implement this class. LCL ABC implementation. What? End class. Then here I'll say method. What is this? Constructor. Here I'll say write what? Inside instance method of what? Instance inside instance constructor end method. This is static constructor. Inside what? Static constructor. Correct. So my class contains what? Both instance and what? Static constructor. So why I'm declaring that? Why I'm declaring that in the public section? Because my class visibility is also what? Public. Okay, done. Now what I'll do is, yeah. So in the earlier example, what we understood is the instance constructor gets executed. The instance constructor gets executed as and when we create the object. One second. I'll go back to my previous example. So in the previous example, our class contains only what? Instance constructor. So I'll just say right inside what? Instance constructor. Inside instance constructor. Okay, done. So when this instance constructor is getting executed, when you create the object. So when I do the syntax check, no errors. Yeah, the moment I create the object, the constructor is getting what? Executed. I got the result. Inside instance constructor, we have initialized and we are calling what? Display method. Okay. Now I'll do one thing, one small change I'll do. Inside this previous example class, in the public section, I'll take one static attribute, class hyphen data x type I. What I took? One static attribute x type I. So since it is public, since this is public, I can access it outside now. And since this is static, I can access either by using object or by using what? class. Okay, so see this. What I'll do is, let me comment this portion. I'm not creating the object, right? I'm not creating the object, right? Let me comment this. I'm not creating any object. I'll directly access this static attribute outside. Can I access? Yes, it is public, I can access. Since it is static, I can access by using what? I can access by using what? Class name. So let me access somewhere here. I'll say implies x equal to something 20 something. I'm just accessing the static attribute. I have not created any object. Remember, save it, check for the syntax error, done, execute. Okay, I'm entering some input values, execute. Yeah, what happened? Nothing. Means, did I got any message like inside instance constructor? No, because I have not created the object. The instance constructor is not getting executed. I'm just accessing what? Okay, accessing what? Static attribute using what? Class name. Okay, I'm just giving that statement there. What is there? Yeah, I'm just giving that statement. So when I enter, I'm reading the input, but I'm not creating the object. Yeah, what happened here? Accessing the static attribute using class name. So what I want to show you is the instance construct is not getting executed. When it is getting executed, only when you create what? Object. Only when you create the object, the instance constructor gets executed. Then after that, we are calling what? Display method for displaying the values of the attribute. So when I execute now, yes. Okay, you can see now the instance is getting executed because I created the object. So what is the point you have to understand is, in this example, if I don't create the object, the construct is not getting executed. Keep that point in mind. Okay, I'm adding one static attribute. I'm accessing that static attribute using the class name. So when I access here, the instance construct is not getting executed. The instance construct is getting executed only when you create the object, right? Keep this point in mind. Okay, now based on this point, yeah, what I'll do in this example is, I'm adding one instance constructor, one static constructor. I'll take one static component. Let me take one static component class -x type I. I'm not creating any object for my class. I'm not creating any object for my class. I'll just say accessing what? Static attribute. Okay, I'll say, what is that? What is the class name? Can I access it outside? Yes, it is public. LCL underscore ABC implies what? X equal to 34. I'm just accessing the static component. Save it, check for the syntax, no error. When I execute, yeah, when I'm executing, I'm just accessing the static component. I have not created any object. So when I execute this, yeah, what is the output I got? Inside what? Static constructor. Then I got the right statement, what? Accessing what? Static attribute. So what you have to understand from this output is, I have not created any object. Without creating the object also, the static constructor is getting executed now, because I access what? Static component. So keep this in mind. Now I'll comment this. Right? I'm commenting this. I'm not accessing any static component. So when I execute, when I say fetch, nothing is happening. I'm not getting any result. Now what I'll do, I'll create the first object for my class. I'll create the first object for my class. First object OB1. how do I create data of what? OB1 equal to new, what is the class name? LCL underscore what? ABs. I am creating the first object for my class. So when I do syntax check, no errors. When I execute, yes, what happened here? I got that right statement first object. Then what is happening? Inside what? Static constructor. Then I got what? Inside instance constructor. So what is the point here? When I create the first object, what is happening? First the static constructor is getting executed. Then what? Instance constructor. Keep this in mind. Now I'll say I am creating the second object. I am creating the second object here. So earlier on behalf of the first object, what happens? Both static and instance constructor got executed. Now I'm creating the second object. When I do when I do syntax check, when I say f8, what happened here? On behalf of the second object, what got executed? Only instance constructor got executed. Okay, I'll do one thing. I'll create the third object. I'm creating the third object. What happened? On behalf of the third object also, only what? The instance constructor is getting what? Executed. Okay, on behalf of the third object also only instance constructor is getting executed. So what happened here? On behalf of the first object, both static and instance constructor getting executed. From the second object onwards, only instance constructor is getting executed. So what we understood from this one, the static constructor will be executed only once in the lifetime of the whole class, whereas instance constructor gets executed every time whenever we create the new instance. That is what we are able to see. Okay, so in this output, by looking at the output, what is our feeling? The static constructor is getting executed when I create what? First object. When I create the first object. Now what I'll do, I will not create any object. I am not creating any objects, right? I am directly accessing what? My one of the static components. So save it, check for the syntax error. When I execute, what happened? Now also static construct is getting executed. Na? So don't think that static construct will be executed when you create the first object. Okay. So in this case, it got executed before creating any object. Now what I'll do, I'll create the first object. In the earlier execution, what we understood, on behalf of the first object, static constructor is getting executed. Na? But here, in this case, static constructor already got executed on accessing this component. And what we know, static constructor will be executed only once in the lifetime of the whole class. So even though this is first object now, see what happens. What happened? On behalf of the first object, what is getting executed? Only what? Instance. Because before creating the first object, only static constructor got executed. So what is the overall summary is, instance constructor is specific to object. For every new instance we create, instance constructor gets executed. Whereas static constructor is not specific to any object. It is executed only once in the lifetime of the whole class. It is executed in either of the following two cases. It is executed in either of the following two cases. What is that case one? When we access any static component, using the class name, when we access any static component using the class name before instantiating any class, that is case one. Or case two is what? Without accessing any static components, if you directly create the first object, on behalf of that first object, both static and instance will be executed, provided if you have not accessed any static components earlier. I'll do one small change. Instead of static, I'll take one constant. Since it is constant, I must initialize. I have initialized. Okay. Now what I'll do here, I will say this is accessing the static attribute. Accessing what? Constant. Constant attributes cannot be changed. So I'll directly display it. Right? LCL underscore implies what? Y. So I'll not create any object. Let me comment this. I'm not creating any object. So what I did here, I'm not accessing the static component. I'm directly accessing what? Constant attribute. So when I do syntax check, no errors, done. When I execute, what happened here? Accessing what? Constant attribute, I got only the value. Did I got any static constructor? No. So what is the point you have to understand here? What is the point you have to understand? Static constructor will be executed. Static constructor will be executed in either of the following two cases. Either, not both. What is that case one? Before instantiating any class, before creating any objects, if you access any static component, on behalf of that accessing, the static constructor gets what? Executed. Case 2 is what? Without accessing any static components, if you directly create the first object, on behalf of that first object, both static and instance constructor will be executed. From the second object onwards, only instance constructor will be executed. So what I am trying to convey is, don't blindly say static will be executed for the first object. No, depends on how you are accessing. Before creating the object, if you directly access any static component, on behalf of that accessing, static constructor gets executed. Once it is executed, when you create the first object also, the static constructor will not be executed. That is what we have seen here. Since already the static constructor got executed, so executes what? Executes what? Static constructor. So see now, what is the error bus? X is unknown now. Why X is unknown? Acha, I have commented it. I have commented it. Let me uncomment. Okay, so you can see the output here. On behalf of first object, only what? Instance is getting executed. Because before creating any object only, we are trying to access what? Static component. Na? That's why on behalf of that accessing, static constructor is getting executed. So summary is what? Static constructor is not specific to any object. It is executed only once in the lifetime of the entire class. It is executed in either of the following cases, whichever occurs first. What is that? All these things I gave in the notes. Refer to that notes. I might have not updated. I'll update it today. I think the notes doesn't contain about constructors. Let me check. If it is not there, I'll update it today and I'll send it. Yeah, it doesn't have constructor. Right. So today I'll update the notes and I'll send it. Okay. Right. So is this clear to everyone? Difference between instance constructor and static constructor. And another point, for this static constructor, wantedly I'll try to take one importing parameter. Earlier you have seen instance constructor can contain what? Importing parameter. Na? So I'm trying to declare the static constructor with one importing parameter. When I do syntax check, I'm getting an error. The method class underscore constructor may not have parameters or what? Exceptions. Only instance constructor can contain importing parameters and exceptions. So this is also ruled out. Static constructor cannot have any parameters, cannot have exceptions also. We don't know exceptions at this stage, leave it. But instance constructor can contain importing parameters and exceptions. Yes, any questions, please ask. So if you see any standard classes, observe here. I'll go to standard class. In this standard class, I need not check for static constructor because anyhow we understood that static constructor never contains what? Parameters. So even though if the standard class contains any static constructor, I need not check for its existence because it will never contain what? Parameters. So if I say like that, it is saying that no static constructor available. Okay, I'll go to other class. CLJ custom container. It is also not there. Yeah, you can see this CLJ container class contains what? Static constructor. It also contains what? Instance constructor. But I need not bother about the static constructor existence because it never contains what? Parameters. If you go to parameters, it will never contain. What is saying here? Class constructors and destructors do not have what? Parameters and what? Exception. So when we get into ABAP, ANA, UI5, anywhere else in SAP technical models, I need not worry about the existence of static constructor. Always focus should be on what? Instance constructor. Yeah, any questions, please? No questions? So if you see this one here, we have done with what? Instance constructor and what? Static constructor also. We know about instance normal method, static normal method, instance what? Constructor and what? Static constructor. We understood the difference also, right? And Kishore, what is your doubt? Is your doubt is rectified or shall I do that? You have sent me that this thing, no?
Yeah, yeah.
I'll just execute this. Yeah. I'll just copy your class as it is. Okay, so what you
Sridhar,
have done here? Yes, Anand?
Sridhar, if it is a static method, only declaration and accessing the static method is the only difference. But as far as static constructor is concerned, importing parameters cannot be there. That's it, right?
Can you repeat, Anand? Sorry.
If it is a static method, only the way we access that can be mentioned. Importing that can be there, but as far as static constructor is concerned, no importing parameters. That's it, right?
Yes, no importing. Yeah. And another point is static methods, static normal methods can be called any number of times, whereas static
Ah,
constructor will be called only once in the lifetime of
once.
the whole
Right,
class. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Okay. So what is that you have done here in the public section? You have declared one instance attribute, static attribute, one constant. Okay. Now what you want, Kishore, here? You want to use a write statement. Okay.
Before write
Okay.
statement, just comment it and put a breakpoint in the report statement.
Okay.
And in the debug mode, I'm not able to recognize. If there is
Start
no
of
write.
selection is missing, right?
Okay, I'll put the breakpoint here when I execute. Yeah, please mute your speakers. Yeah, when I execute. So what you want, Kishore here?
Anyway, like the instance attributes cannot be accessed, I mean, cannot be recognized. So the static attribute or the constant,
Okay.
there is a, yeah,
Implies what is that? LV underscore Z. Hmm.
yeah.
Static, sorry, constant, it is initialized to what? 10. Now, okay, what you are saying is not this ABC, yeah? LC underscore ABC implies LV underscore Y. That's all, no? So what is your question, Kishore? You are saying that this is not recognized, you are saying, right?
Yes, yes. When the class is
Okay.
loaded, generally the, yeah.
Hmm. Okay. So, okay. So how do I explain this? Okay.
If there is a right statement, then it is able to
Correct, correct,
recognize.
correct, correct. Yeah, I got your point here. Okay. Hmm. This is what you are saying, no? Hmm. So how do we interpret this? Static constant in here, it is already what recognized. LV underscore Z, it is 10. Okay. See, what Kishore is saying is, here I don't have the right statement. If you have the right statement, it is showing the initial value for Y, that is 0. But since I don't have any other statement, only the class definition is there. So what is our analysis is, if the once you start the program execution, the class will be loaded, and memory for this static and what constant will be what allocated, and they get initialized default, but it's not showing the value. How can we check that value at this stage is asking. How do we analyze this? One second. So not only right statement, any other statement also it is not showing the values. Yeah, any analysis, anyone? How can we justify this? If you print it, we'll get the default, that is okay. But question is, can we check this value in the debugging without any right state, without any other statement? Kishore, I'll do one thing. Let me analyze it offline because at this stage I cannot give any input. Let me just analyze. If I get any inputs, na, we'll see it in the next week. But I don't think, because in the debugging, I don't have any other option. Na. Here, if you observe this debugging, if I put the breakpoint here, here we have a separate tab for objects, but I don't have any separate tab for class to analyze.
Sir, could you please use start of selection?
Okay. In your default event is startup selection only, na, Giri?
Yeah,
Giri,
correct,
yeah?
correct. Correct, correct, correct.
Okay. If I'm having any executable statements, okay, then it is explicitly required to use startup selection, but otherwise default is startup selection only. Okay, let me use that also and check. Yeah, Manoj, what is your input? Static variables
I got
initialized.
something in Google. I'll just check.
Okay, let me read it. Static variable initialized only once when the program or function or include etc. exists started and does not initialize until the end of the program or function or include etc. The class data statement used to declare static within classes. What is saying static initialize only once, okay, and does not initialize until the end of the program or function or include etc. Okay. Does not initialize until the end of the program or function or include the class data so used to declare static. Okay, that is fine. But I can change the static variable values. No? Constant I cannot change, but does not initialize until the end of the program or function or include etc. No, it is getting initialized. No, if you are having the right statement, we are seeing that it is getting initialized to 0. So that
Yeah, but
that
when no right, it is not. Yeah.
if you have write statement, it is before executing the write statement only, it is initialized. Okay. Mm. Okay, let me check. Kishore, all of you, not only Kishore, all of you just check whether any analysis can be done on this to see that static variable value without using this write statement. If I get the inputs, definitely I'll cover this point in the next class. But I don't think I'll get the inputs because it is not there in the debugging. And whatever Manoj shared here, they are saying does not initialize until the end of the program. It is not like
Sir,
that, right?
good
Yeah,
morning, sir. Sir, in previous cases, without implementation, class is not executing, sir. But in this case, how it is executed?
here class doesn't have methods. No? If the class doesn't
Okay,
have methods, I did not implement the class, no? Right?
okay, okay, sir.
Yeah, right. Kishore, I'll park this aside. All of you just try this. If you get any inputs, drop me a mail. We'll discuss the next week. But I'm not sure whether I can justify this. Okay, right? If I get the inputs, I'll let you know, Kishore. Okay.
Yes. One more, just I noticed
Yeah.
one thing is like
Yeah.
the static and the constant attributes during debugging. We're able to see when object is like either class or object. If you see
Correct.
the when you place the cursor on the icons, you can see it is whether it is instant or static, right?
Okay.
But the text which displayed during debugging when I placed the cursor on the that icon, the classic and sorry, the static and constant, the text is same. It says like static only for
In the
constant as well.
in the debugging, you're saying, huh?
Yes, yes.
Can you tell me what to do now?
I just
What
I
you want
mean
me
like
to do?
yeah, you can access using class
Okay, here,
those static. Yeah,
LCL underscore ABC using write statement. Huh?
uh, not yeah. Yeah, you can use right statement.
Yeah. So when I execute this, what is the class name? LCL underscore ABC. Okay. LCL underscore ABC implies LV underscore Y. Then LCL underscore ABC implies LV underscore what? Z. Okay. Yeah. Now what you want me to do, Kishore?
Like I
Now it
think
is
yeah,
initialized, right? Zero. Now it is initialized, right?
Yeah, yeah, because write statement is there. That's what the
Uh,
Giri is saying.
right statement is not triggered now.
Not triggered, but the
Uh,
program contains write statement. You understood? Program contains write statement. That's why it is showing that. If the program doesn't have write statement, it is not showing this initialization. That's what the question was.
okay.
Even though the write statement is not executed, since the program contains write statement, it is showing this value.
Kindly check after commenting right statement, start of selection and load of program. Those two events, we will check whether it is working or not.
Yeah, yeah, we'll see that. Yeah, Kishore, what you want me to do here?
yeah. I think we can't see the class attributes, right? So I think we need to implement the object. I mean, like we need to declare, we need to create the object.
Create the object.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. One second. One second, please. Okay, so I'm trying to create the object for the class. Okay, as of now, fine. Now I'll create the object. If it is using class name, it will show that y and z, lv underscore y, then lcl underscore abc implies lv underscore what z. Okay, now I'll say fi. Shall I press fi now, Kishore?
Yeah, so, yeah,
Okay, I
yeah.
press
If you double
fi.
click on OB1 object,
This one, huh?
OB1, yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah. The icons on the visibility right section.
okay,
Yeah,
acha, acha. Okay, why it is showing like this? You are saying, okay. Hmm.
yeah.
So the only understanding is, so it is not in our hands. The only understanding is, since they are not specific to any object, I think they gave it a static. So it's a kind of a bug only. Correct. You understood all of you here? Here y is a static and z is constant, but same icon and the tooltip also it is showing same. Here, see at the end, read only is there. Constant cannot be modified. So they there they differentiate it here. Whereas for static, we already know static can be modified. So they are not selected as read only. But here they kept that constant as what read only because it cannot be modified. But otherwise, here the text it is showing it as what same. So these are all things not required much, Kishore. Okay, you can ignore because this is a default implementation given by SAP. So we need not bother about that. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Just
Yeah.
notice that.
Correct. 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 Yeah. Yeah, Giri, you are saying something. What was your point?
Just start of selection and load of program event we can write without write statement. You can check once.
Okay, 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 okay.
Load of program maybe before to start of selection. Right?
No, I can handle the events in any sequence. No?
Oh, okay, okay,
Doesn't matter, but SAP will trigger in its own sequence.
okay, right.
As a developer, I can handle in any sequence.
Okay, right.
Same story. Same story. Still, it is not recognized. Shall I write any statement here? Yeah. Now, since the load of program contains statements, let me check now. LCL underscore ABC implies LV underscore Y. No, still same issue. Even though we have the load of programs, still it is not recognized. Same story. No, it's not working, Gary. Okay, so same thing. Let me check whether I can get any inputs on this. I will see that. Yeah, Anand, any inputs?
Oh, no, nothing. No.
Okay, yeah, fine. Yeah, apart from this, any other queries in the concepts which we discuss? Friend, load, deferred, instance method, static method, instance constructor, static constructor, instance attribute, static attribute, right? So any queries, you can drop me a mail. I'll reply to that in my free time. So next week, we'll discuss about inheritance, polymorphism, abstract classes, interfaces, and visibility at class level. So those 5 concepts we'll discuss in the next weekend. Interfaces, uh, what else? Inheritance, polymorphism, abstract classes, visibility at class level. So for that, the basis, all these 6: instance attribute, static attribute, instance method, static method, instance constructor, static constructor, difference between public, protected, private at component level. So in the next week, we'll understand more about public, protected, private, how it differs at component level and at what class level. Done. And I've shared the material to everyone. Hope everyone has received. Anyone not yet
Yes.
received? Sure then. So I'll wind off. We'll meet again on next weekend. Okay. So it looks simple, all this thing, but spend time on the system so that'll be easy for the future classes. Okay. Sure. Thank you, everyone. We'll meet again on Saturday.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.